my third question on the reading sheet contrasts Duns Scotus, Thomas Aquinas, and Harclay on the reality of universals. He discusses Harclay on 52. Then at bottom of 53 we get the summary. Scotus and Avicenna held that every concept represents an essence. The essence is present then in each individual. So to know the concept is to know the essence which informs each individual being. So it's come to an intellectual knowledge through the universal of the sort of inner life, the inner reality of each individual of that universal. Harclay criticizes this Scotist and Avicennian position and holds that a general idea is either nothing or it's a mere definition. So we have Harclay giving us a theory of confused and distinct impressions. Let's do this very quickly. Harclay. Some of our impressions are confused and some are distinct. With a confused impression, a confused expression permits us to draw conclusions about the species, the type of thing that the individual is. To perceive an individual in a confused way is to perceive it as a kind of species being. I know enough from looking at dogs to know something about, I look at this dog, I learn something about all dogs. That's actually what a confused general knowledge of dogs is. To have a distinct impression of this dog is to know enough about it to be able to draw conclusions about this individual as distinct from other members of the same species. So it's almost just a matter of how tight we've dialed down the focus knob of our microscope. Do we have in focus the group and the group properties, or do we have in focus the individual and the individual's distinctness from the group? This gets him a distinction between things. It allows Harclay to say that knowledge of universals is really just this knowledge of species. Right? The universals, dogs, trees, whatever we want to talk about. This is where the universals are, the so-called universals. The trouble, though, is that they're founded in confusion of the intellect. We only have a sort of vague, fuzzy knowledge of them, and this seems to conflict with the Aristotelian idea, still current at the time, that science is a matter of grasping the truth of things, and it grasps the truth of things as being science of universals. Science is of universals. So as Gilson says early in the chapter, Harclay's in the weird position of seeming to have to maintain that our ability to have scientific scientia, right, scientific knowledge of things, depends upon our conceiving of them in a confused rather than a precise manner. It seems that the generality of our grasp of things comes from a limitation or imperfection of our minds, and we're not paying close enough attention. There's something important here. I'll just pause and note this. Some of you know this from a philosophy of science course. There's an important break that takes place in our use of the word science and our definition of the type of knowledge that science gives us. At this period, prior to this, and even for a while after this, we think of science as being universal knowledge. To have scientific grasp of something, to know it completely, is to know it through the universal or essential qualities of the things. So the person who knows horses, going back to Plato, is the person who actually grasps what it is to be a horse in some important fashion. A person who only sort of has practical experience of horses, the horse trainer perhaps, who's not a real scholar of horses, that person we would say just has a knack for horses. He can make the right call most of the time, but not have any sort of deep grasp of the form of horse. That's what's needed for science. At some point, certainly by the 19th century, we have this inversion where now we begin to think of scientific knowledge as being knowledge of individuals, knowledge of particulars, not requiring this abstraction to the universal nature of things. I just want to point this out because the associations that we have with the word science undergo a parallel shift. We no longer think of science as being a kind of universal knowledge of things, universal philosophical grasp of the ultimate realities of things. We think of science now as being a bunch of little sort of particle-sized observational knowledge and then sort of a practical ability to extract a theory that is predictive over that set of data. So there's something that's much less associated with the scientia of the classical tradition and much more sort of ground up empirical based upon accurate prediction of future observations. So I won't get into the actual mechanism of that inversion, but we're prior to the inversion here, so when Harclay finds himself associating scientific knowledge with confusion, we have a problem.